Oh, listeners, welcome to this wonderful episode of the Love Your Life show. I am so excited because I had Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson on the show today, and I'm excited for many, many reasons. First of which is I have over 350 episodes of the Love Your Life show. I don't have a single one on addiction, let alone addiction to food, and we dive into it here. Second, this conversation was really personal for me and heart opening. It felt, listen, and she just is a wonderfully compassionate human, and I really enjoyed talking to her. So Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson is a multiple New York Times bestselling author, an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive science, and an expert in the psychology of eating. She's the president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and the founder of Bright Line Eating, a global movement that helps people break free from ultra-processed food addiction and maintain a healthy weight long term. I am so excited to have her on to speak about addiction for you to listen into her calming and supportive way of being and learn about what happens in our brain with addiction while specifically looking at food addiction, what it looks like, what it feels like, and most importantly, if this feels familiar to you, to give you a path towards freedom, my dear, wonderful listener. So right, and welcome to the Love Your Life show, Susan. I am so excited you're here to speak about something that I have not brought up on this podcast before. And I would love to just get started a little with the listeners who maybe they've been living under a rock and they haven't heard of you and all the amazingness you're doing in the world. Can you start by briefly explaining how you got here? A woman in her 50s, like me, supporting humans with food addiction.
Oh, well, Susie, it's great to be on here. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I got here honestly, man. I took the path. Um, I traveled the road of an addict. I mean,
Mm,
I was probably addicted to food and sugar before I ever realized that. I mean, I was before I ever realized that. But the first thing I really got addicted to, where there's no denying it, was drugs.
mm,
And that was age 14 to 20. Hard drugs. I mean, I started off alcohol, pot, mushrooms, acid, ecstasy, and then I found crystal meth, and then I started smoking crack, and I became a prostitute, and then I got clean and sober when I
mm,
was 20. But then I just uh, went right back to food. And I
mm,
would go to 12-step meetings and then leave the meeting and go to, jump to three different stores to get all my
mm,
supplies and just go home and binge all night. And
mm,
I whacked on a ton of weight. So by my mid-20s, I was living with chronic obesity, and my food and my weight were making me crazy. And I tried everything, Susie. I tried everything. And, I was doing a 12-step program for drug and alcohol addiction. I tried a 12-step program for food, and what I found was that it just wasn't so clear.
mm.
If you're an alcoholic, put the plug in the
That's
jug.
right. Yeah.
Easy, right? I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy. I've done
Mm-mm.
it. It's not
Mhm,
easy, but it's clear,
mhm.
right? Like I always know whether I've smoked crack or not. I always know whether I've had a drink or
Yeah.
not.
And you don't need to smoke crack to survive, which is, yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah. Or you don't
But
have to
with
have a
food,
drink.
it's like, what's the plug? What's the jug? I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
What am I abstaining from? And, so you don't have to eat donuts to live. You have to eat to live, but you don't have to eat donuts to live. But then beyond donuts, it starts to get really slippery, and there were lots of times when I felt like I was on a food plan, working a 12-step program for food, but I was doing things that were still triggering me. Yogurt with fruit on the bottom, or barbecue sauce on meat, or
Mm.
6 cans of diet soda or whatever. And it was really hard to know where the boundaries were. What about honey? What about sugar-free cough drops if I actually really have a cough? What
Mm.
about, what about, what about, what about? So I spent 8 years still floundering. And, 12-step food programs are interesting because there's, 8 or 10 of them with significant membership. And they vary from place to place, city to city, how they're run.
Mhm.
And Eventually, I moved across the country to Rochester, New York. I mean, I should back up actually and say a difference between drug and alcohol addiction and food addiction is you can function with food addiction, and
Mm-hmm.
lots of people do. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
can top up with sugar, flour, and caffeine and conquer
Mm-hmm.
the world. And after I got clean and sober, that's what I did. I went to community college. I transferred to a 4-year college, UC Berkeley. I got straight A's. I graduated, summa cum laude, Phi Beta
Mm.
Kappa, spoke
Like
at the
no
grad.
problem here. Right.
Yeah, just, I mean, writing research papers at night, eating a box of brown sugar through the
Mm.
night to write the paper, and downing caffeine. And so I moved to Rochester, New York to get a PhD in brain and cognitive sciences. And it was in Rochester, New York, eventually that I found sort of a group of people who gave me more clarity about what to do with food. No sugar, no flour, stop the snacking, weigh and measure your meals. And I lost all my excess weight
Mm.
pretty quickly, about 6 months. I lost 60 pounds in 6 months,
Wow.
and and I've kept it off. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I went from obese to slender, and I've been in I call it a bright body,
Mm-hmm.
for 22 years now. Um, Meanwhile, I became a tenured psychology professor. I started teaching a college course on the psychology of eating and the
Mm-hmm.
neuroscience of food addiction. And I was sponsoring a lot of people in
Mm.
the 12-step model. And as time went on, it got clearer and clearer and clearer to me that the way I was doing recovery, most people wouldn't do. They didn't want
Mm.
to. No one was coming. All the people I knew who had weight struggles, they were not willing to do what I was doing. And
Mm.
for good reason. It was taking me 30 hours a week to do it all. Like it was a
Mm.
lot of meetings and a lot of time and very intensive and standing in front of the room. My name is Susan. I'm a food addict, and
Mm.
people didn't want that. And there also was no scientific understanding about it. I was teaching the neuroscience of food addiction in my college course. And in my morning meditation, about 11 and a half years ago, January 26th, 2014, the universe just laid it on me, just said, Susan, write a book called Bright Line Eating.
Mm.
And I just learned about the term bright line. It's a legal term actually. A
Mm.
bright line rule in the law is a clear, unambiguous boundary
Mm.
that you just don't cross to get predictable and consistent results. And
Mm.
I just learned that, and I guess, write a book called Bright Line Eating was the directive that was kind of the precursor to this global movement that sprung up. I did ultimately write that book, and it became a New York Times bestseller, and that's really the backstory.
Oh, there's so much there. I'm just nodding along with all of it. And I'm so grateful that you did have that moment in 2014 and also just shared your experience with, in your 14 to 20 years when you were 14 and 20. Thank you for that because it is interesting. I guess what's coming up for me is how do we know, because it's like you addiction hopped is what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
I think that is so common when we're not addressing sort of like we have this addictive brain, well, then we just fill it in with something else and bring our misery there also. So how would you know for my listeners who are, have a lot of thoughts about food and a lot of their days spent thinking about food, how do you know if you're in this addicted brain or if you're just sort of suffering from years of dieting and trauma and growing up in a patriarchal society where we're valued for our weight or are they the same thing or what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could take my quiz. I've got it. There's a simple 5-question quiz. You can go to
Mhm.
foodaddictionquiz.com. And at foodaddictionquiz.com, it'll start off by saying, think back to a time in your life when your eating was at its worst. Not a day when it was at
Mhm.
its worst, but few months, right, where your eating was really at its worst. And answer these questions as if it were then. And the reason for that is that once fiber tracts are formed in the brain,
Mhm.
they never go away. You can stop using them and train yourself to live otherwise. And
Mhm.
stop the neural energy flowing down those fiber tracks, but they'll still be there.
Mm,
And there's several bodies of research that show basically we do not forget how we used to be. And so if you've ever eaten super intensively, addictively, you're going to have to work a program that is strong enough to, you're just going to have to be more vigilant, right?
hmm
Than someone who's
hmm
never had those issues. But the quiz is really 5 questions, and it comes down to things like, when you start to eat, do you feel like you lose control over how
mm
much you eat? And is that happening always, sometimes, or never?
mm
Like when you start to eat, does it feel like a slippery slope? Are you promising yourself one piece of pizza and then having four
hmm
and then thinking, how did that happen? Um,
You're sort of
do
hiding
you
from yourself. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I used to do that over and over and over again. I always felt, not always, but really most of the time, I would feel like I lost control over how much I
hmm
ate, or I wouldn't even try to control my quantities. I would just
Mm,
eat until I was stuffed all the time. Another sure th sign is if you feel like you don't really get full like other people get
mm,
full, you eat. And other people are like, "Oh, ugh, I'm just full now." And you're kind of like, "What do they mean?" Because I feel like I could just
get
keep
four more of
eating.
these. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or are you looking at people around the table who say, "Oh, I just want one bite of a dessert." The seven of you, do you want to share a dessert? Because
Mm,
all I need is one bite after dinner and I'm satisfied. And are you thinking, I'm never thinking that. When I have
hmm
one bite, I want another and then another and then another. One bite doesn't scratch the itch for me, it makes it itchier. As
mm,
soon as I have one bite, I want another bite. That's how it works for me. What are these people talking about that one bite satiates something and turns off the switch and now they're good?
hmm
If you don't relate to that, then that might be a sign. Another one is if you look at how much of your bandwidth, focus, intentionality, time, all of that is taken up by your food and your weight, right?
mm,
What you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your plan or off your plan, how many miles, how many calories, how many pounds. Have you at the gym yet? Did you, eat a ton yesterday? So you need
mm,
to be good today. Do you wake up in the morning trying to remember what you ate last night? Do you step on the scale and the number determines your feelings about yourself? Like,
mm,
does that all feel like it's out of proportion to the life you want to be living? Is
mm,
it taking up too much space in your head, your heart, your mind, your soul? Like the people who work the program that I founded, Bright Line Eating, who are really on point with it, they will say that all of that stuff, their food, their weight, their program, all of it, takes about 15% of
mm,
their bandwidth. And in that 15%, they're meditating in the morning. They're
mm.
planning their food the night before. They're making sure that they're eating up the produce that's about to go bad. Produce
Mhm.
doesn't go bad in their
Right.
fridge because they're planning their food strategically. They're making reach out calls to people that love and support them on the
Mm,
path. They're listening to supportive audios and
mhm,
watching supportive videos. They're tuning in to an accountability call in the morning that bursts their heart with
mm.
joy and makes them feel connected and loved. And that's what's in the 15%.
That's
It's
shocking
not
because yeah, otherwise they're spending 85% of their time thinking about food and, when they can have that next cough drop, even though they don't have a cough. Like you just nailed so many of the things. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm seeing,
totally.
yeah, that is wonderful. Right. Well, and so I guess that's where I just want to highlight for listeners because you do speak of this. I think if listeners are hearing you and they're like, oh my goodness, this is me, and I will definitely put the link to that quiz in there because I took it and it's very enlightening. And then you get a lot of your good emails and it will direct you towards your program. And they might feel heavy. That was sort of my first thing where it's like, oh no, this is just the reality. And sometimes when we sort of take our glasses off with ourselves and see what's going on, we're no longer playing the game. It's like, oh no, you've got something going on here, which is, I think, on one hand, heavy, but on another end, I just want to encourage listeners to see the freedom in it if it's feeling true for them, because it is, you speak very well to this, the shame that comes from when we're thinking it's our problem, that it's like a willpower issue is real. And what you speak to is that, when we're addicted to food, it's a brain-based issue. Can you explain a little more about that or how that is
Yeah,
showing up.
absolutely. In modern society, food is the hardest addiction to kick, for sure. When I quit crack cocaine, I could drive to work and back and spend all day without seeing any advertisements to smoke
Mm,
crack, without anyone offering me any, without,
mm,
really having any cues to pick up my drug of choice at all. When food
mm,
is your drug of choice, all of a sudden your whole day is a relapse pitfall.
mm.
And people don't understand, and they're pushing things on you, left, right, and center, and it's hard. So
Oh,
I
that's so
would
true. Yeah,
say,
and you're driving by the restaurants and you're seeing
yeah,
the ads
the
pop. Yeah.
logos, the
Mm-hmm.
billboards, then you
Mm-hmm.
go home and it's on the TV and the
Mm-hmm.
commercial. It's everywhere. Now, the brain of someone who has a more addictive relationship with a substance like ultra processed food or sugar or flour, um, gets extra triggered by that stuff. It's extra salient for our
Mm,
brains. And what happens is we're suffering from something called dopamine downregulation, which means that by eating a lot of foods with sugar and flour, these foods didn't exist back in the day. There are no natural foods, not one, that have high concentrations of both fat and refined carbohydrate
mm,
like all the, not all, but most of the foods that we get attracted to, cookies, cakes, ice cream, all those things, they're combinations of fat and sugar,
mm-hmm.
right? And yes, you can love potato chips, fat and salt. Yes, you can love straight hard candy, just sugar, but the combinations especially do us in. Those are not natural substances. And frankly, neither are potato chips nor hard candy. It's all
Mm-hmm.
fake, right?
Yeah.
You don't get that stuff in the wild. What have you got in the wild? Blueberries?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Like that's the best you can do in the wild. What
Mm-hmm.
that means is that these foods are flooding the disease centers in the brain, the addictive centers in the brain. We're talking about the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area. If the brain is a cue ball, it's li almost literally right in the center of
Mm,
it. It's, the brain stem comes up the spinal cord, right at the top is the brain stem there. And then right above that, you've got these primitive centers in the brain
mm,
that are the addictive pathways. It's the mesolimbic reward pathway. And this is the part of the brain that is designed to make sure that you have enough motivation to get what you need to survive.
mm,
It's the I don't have enough, go get it, go seek it, I need more, and I've got to, when the hit comes, I've got to remember what preceded that so I can find it again.
mm,
And it's the missile seeking, I've got to go get it and get more things. So dopamine is the molecule of more. And there's a great
mm,
book by that title, by the way, that I highly recommend everyone read.
mm,
More, more, more. And when we eat, let's just say a donut, any of the foods I've mentioned really, it floods that area of the brain with more dopamine than it ever was designed to handle.
mm,
And over time, the receptors adapt to that. They go, okay, well, I guess this is my new normal now. I'm getting all this stimulation. They know it's too much.
mm,
They respond by thinning out and becoming less numerous and less responsive so that the ultimate signal that gets passed on is of the right size. Like all this stimulation's coming in,
mm.
they thin out, so they pass on a reasonable size signal. And that's all fine and dandy as long as you plan to top up with more sugar and flour every hour or two. But you've now rewired the brain so that at baseline, without sugar and flour pumping in on the regular, you now feel not okay.
Mm,
You feel bleak, desperate, restless, irritable, something's off. You're
mm,
not sure what, but all you know is you're on your way to the vending machine or the Starbucks or the cafe or
mm.
the convenience store or the fridge or the cupboard or the freezer because you've got to get something to
Get your
feel,
hit.
you got to go
Mm,
get it. So that's how it's a brain-based issue. Now, the thing that people don't realize
mm,
is that this is all happening at the deepest level of the brain. What it sounds like to us is maybe a negotiation if we're on some sort of diet, like
mm,
some sort of trade, like, well, I did work out 3 times already this week, and so I can probably just go and have some tea with a little, cream and sugar, and that would probably, it might sound like that.
Mm,
It could sound like any number of things, but it's going to sound like our own voice in our own head tricking us into having a little something, something. That's what it's going to sound like. Now, here's where I can give you a really good analogy.
so sneaky.
It's so sneaky.
Hmm.
And we conclude that we just let ourselves down. After the fact, we think, why do I keep doing this to myself, right? But
Mm-hmm.
our brains are hijacked. Let me give you an example. Susie, imagine that there's some incredible motivation for you. Think about the world's best motivation, and I can think of a positive one and a negative one, whatever.
Hmm.
But you're going to need to climb up 40 flights of stairs without taking a breath. And if you do that, you'll get $5 billion. Or if you fail to do that, I'm going to say something traumatic and terrible, trauma
Right.
warning, your child will get shot in the head,
Yeah.
if you don't, right? There's no way on earth that you're not going to try your hardest to do this. But you and I know you can't do that,
Mm,
right?
right.
You will not run up 40 flights of stairs without taking a single breath, holding
Mm-hmm.
your breath the whole way. It's not possible,
Mm.
right? But you're going to try
I'm
because
gonna
you've got to.
try.
Now imagine what it's going to sound like in your head, right? You
Mm,
get up 1 flight of stairs, you get up 2 flights of stairs. Now you're thinking and you can hear your own voice in your head, right? I've made it to 38 to go. I'm running out of breath. I feel like I'm going to die. I've made it 3. I've made it 4.
mm,
Can't you hear that your voice in your head at some point would talk you into taking a breath?
mhm,
Maybe on flight 7 or 8, at some point you'd be like, I can't. Okay, well, what's going to happen now? I don't know, but I gotta just breathe, right?
mhm,
Now, there's no reasonable world in which you can conclude that you chose to breathe.
mm,
Your brain forced you to breathe,
mhm.
agreed?
Yeah.
And it did that by convincing you in your own voice that now you're going to take a breath.
Hmm.
That's what happens with food. Our brain is hijacked, and this voice in our head tricks us into eating something.
Mm,
And then over time, we look at the facts on this side of the equation. I started that food plan, that diet, that program, that gym membership with every intention to stick with it, to make it work this time, to get this weight off. And on the other end, we see that we just decided to have nachos and beer and pizza on a Friday night because it was a stressful week.
mm-mm,
And we end up concluding things about ourselves. This is another piece of psychology that's really fascinating. It's called self-perception theory.
mm,
Daryl Bem came up with this at Cornell University in 1970 something. The basic idea is that we conclude stuff about who we are by watching our behavior.
mm,
So when we keep watching ourselves betray our most intensive desires for our life for something stupid like, I had a stressful week, so I'm
right.
having
Yeah.
beer and pizza and wings, we start to conclude, I must not love myself. I
Mm,
must not trust myself. I must not be trustworthy. I must have deep-seated
mm,
psychological issues. There's something wrong with me. Why am I such a loser? Why we might conclude that we hate ourselves,
mm,
that we don't want to be successful.
mhm,
And that's what we end up living with is that belief about ourselves. And then when people start my program and they get the addictive foods out of their system, their brain starts to heal. And I teach them to write down what they're going to eat the night before, really commit it, and then the next day eat only and exactly that. Within 3 weeks,
mhm,
we see like 80% of their deepest psychological self-esteem issues melt away
mm,
because they weren't real in the first place. That was
mhm,
just what they'd concluded based on watching themselves not have integrity with themselves, not be able to show up for themselves. And now all of a sudden they watch themselves show up in the way they have
mm.
always wanted to, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, that's right. I always
Ah,
knew I was a kind, good person, able to
mhm,
follow through on things and capable in lots of ways. And now I'm doing it with my food and my weight. And now I really understand. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I love,
I just want listeners to hear that because that has been my experience. And I guess similar to you, I started with alcohol and then read a book, Quit Like a Woman, where I was alerted to the manipulation behind, that alcohol, I wasn't in that thought that I was like an addicted to alcohol. Like I'd have one drink a week or two drinks a week or something, but still it wasn't doing me any favors. But when I sort of shifted my mindset to be like, oh my gosh, I'm letting big alcohol control my moods. Because whenever I did drink, then I would get a little snippy or I just wasn't my best self. And I'm like, okay, so why am I putting this substance in here that's people are studying how to do this. I felt like a pawn in that. So that was a pretty easy switch to flip for me. And then with food, what I just want listeners to hear is that, white sugar and flour are addictive also. They do things in our brain. They are not natural food. They are manufactured by companies trying to get us to be addicted so that we are, increasing their bottom line. And that in itself, then it leads us to all these things that, that we're feeling awful about ourselves and whereas it's like, it's not you, it's the substance. It is that we're doing exactly what the people want us to do with our brain. I don't know if I'm saying that well, but I really want people to look at that the foods made out of food and sugar, and you've quoted numerous research studies on this, that they are truly psychologically addictive, and that we need to be aware of that and not just be sort of like blind pawns in people's
yeah,
space. That's really been helpful for me to see from this, maybe like, oh my gosh, the heaviness of like, oh wow, this might be me, but the more there's something for you to do. And while it's not easy, it's simple. And that's what I love about your program, the Bright Line. There are four parts of it. It's like super simple. And that, I mean, you said 3 weeks, your research shows 80%. I'd say in 4 days, even one day, I felt better in making a plan, following my plan. And I didn't feel good resisting the urges. I don't want people to get that wrong, but I felt really good about myself at the end of it, looking back and being like, oh, okay. And then when you start to get the addictive substances out, well, then that's a heck of a
yeah.
lot easier too. So could you share, we've sort of danced around it, but what is bright line eating, and how does it make it different than other food plan
Yeah,
methods?
sure. Braille eating it's almost the opposite of any, if you've never
It
tried
really
it, it's
is.
probably the opposite of any diet or food plan you've ever tried. We don't think of it as a diet. It's really when people say diets don't work, you have to change your lifestyle. We dive really into what does that mean exactly?
Hmm.
This is a total lifestyle change. But what it is basically is it's a program of eating and living that's based on four bright lines. Again, a bright line is just a clear boundary that you just don't cross. Like if you're a 3 pack a day smoker and you're gonna quit, you have lung cancer,
Hmm.
you're not gonna try to
You're
smoke
just done.
moderately.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
gonna quit smoking. That's a bright line for
Hmm.
cigarettes. Our bright lines are no sugar, no flour, and no snacking. So eating only meals, typically 3 meals a day, and bounding your quantities precisely. So typically a digital food scale is the
Hmm.
way you do that. And so sugar, flour, meals, and quantities. Those are the four bright lines. And the so first of all, what's countercultural about that is probably any program you've ever tried includes snacks.
Mm.
It includes like free foods or a free day or free cheap meals or some kind
Weight
of
Watchers
stuff
do
like
zero
that.
points. You can eat as
0
many.
points. Almost all the food that's on our plan is 0 point food in
Yeah.
Weight Watchers. Like, because you can eat anyway, whatever.
Right.
But the thing about addiction is it's not just a substance addiction to sugar and
Hmm.
flour. It's also a behavioral or process addiction to bending your elbow and putting food in your mouth all the time, chewing
Hmm.
gum, drinking diet soda, the
Hmm.
consume, 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 consume. That's an addiction to eating, swallowing, chewing, consuming. It's a
Hmm.
behavioral addiction. And bright line eating breaks that with the last two bright lines, meals and quantities. You
Hmm.
bound that. You're not eating all day. And what that does is it opens up huge chunks of time now to be productive and get busy with life. People
Takes the
start
food
living
out of your
life.
brain. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it gives you that. time
Yeah,
back.
the minute a meal is done, the
Hmm.
brain stops suggesting that you're going to have any more. It knows you're not. You
Hmm.
train it really fast, and the brain stops hounding you for more and more and more. So that's what bright line eating is. And some other ways that it's very different from other plans is it's designed to be maximally automatizable. So automaticity is a big part of bright line eating, and this is how we overcome the willpower issue.
Hmm.
So the willpower gap is a very real thing. From a brain-based perspective, the part of your brain that's trying to keep you from eating off your plan, it's resisting temptations. It's got other temptations it's trying to resist. Maybe
Hmm.
you're trying to not scroll social media so much, or maybe you're trying to I don't know, whatever, drink eight
Right.
glasses of water. I don't know what you're trying to do, but it's trying to regulate that. It's also responsible for your regulating your emotional responses, your emotional outbursts. It's trying to
Mm.
regulate that. It's responsible for monitoring your task performance. So maybe you're a teacher and you're checking an attendance grade sheet or something like that, or
Mm.
you're in an Excel spreadsheet and you're trying to maybe you're a copy editor and you're just doing your job, trying to
Hmm.
read sentences and check stuff. That's all the same part of the brain. It's the anterior cingulate cortex. It gets very overloaded. Oh, and making decisions,
Mm.
which is checking email, right?
Mm.
Like reply all, file it, label it, save it, leave it in the inbox. What am I doing with
Mm.
this thing? And on to the next one. It's decision, 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 decision. In modern life, with traffic and kids and email and all the things, food temptations, this part of the brain is working overtime all day. Now, the problem is this part of the brain only has 15 minutes of good juice at any given time, and it becomes depleted very quickly. And that issue is not going away in our lifetime. And what that means is that any food plan that's going to work is going to have to assume that you have no willpower at any
Mm.
given moment because you may not. Well, how's that going to work? Like how do you reconcile, Dr. Thompson, a no sugar, no flour food plan and not eating in between meals with the fact that you're telling us we are not going to have willpower at any given moment? Well, what we do is we wire in your eating using the same part of the brain that you wire in your teeth brushing with.
Hmm.
Like, think about how you brush your teeth. Now, okay, if you're one of the 5% of people that doesn't brush their teeth regularly, I'm not talking to you. I'm
Right.
talking to 95% of people that get to the end of the day, whether you're sick, you're traveling, you're
You just
grumpy,
brush your
it's
teeth.
late, you just brush your teeth before
Right.
you go to bed. Not because you have a sticky note on the mirror to remind
Hmm.
you, not because you've got extra willpower in your tank, not because you want to, but because it
Hmm.
just happens, right? It just
Hmm.
happens. And it's cued by a certain script of how you live your day. It's the thing that you do before bed.
Hmm.
It's cued by a certain time of day and a certain pattern of the day unfolds. And at this point in the day, this is what I do. And breakfast, lunch, and dinner can be wired in that same
Hmm.
way. You can wire breakfast into a morning routine. You can wire lunch into that midday pause, and you can wire dinner into an evening routine. And no matter how grumpy, how depressed, how angry, how depleted you are, you can find yourself getting out your digital food
Hmm.
scale, throwing lettuce into a bowl, finding some protein and putting that on top of that. You already wrote down your food the night before, so you know what it is. You're checking your little book, you're assembling your meal while you're yelling at your spouse, complaining at your kids, and
Your life is still going
literally
on, right?
it's all still going on.
Hmm.
And the assemblage of the meal is happening on autopilot. And you're
Hmm.
sitting there and eating your big salad because it's
Hmm.
what you committed and that's what you're having for dinner. And you're living in your right-sized
There's just
body.
no drama. That's what I guess I just love as someone who has this addictive brain that there's it just the freedom that that provides. I
That's
want
right.
listeners to hear because it's if anyone on here has taken alcohol out of their life and at the time you're thinking I could never do this, this would never work, and then now it's 4 years later and you're like I'm not even thinking about wine at
Yeah.
whatever time. That's what the bright line
Or
eating.
smoking, right? I'm a
Yes,
former
yes,
smoker.
yeah. Like I'm
And
not sitting here like when am I getting my next cigarette? You're like,
no,
right,
I'm over it. It's
yeah.
done. It's hard
Hmm.
at first. Once in a blue moon, I have a thought of a cigarette and
Hmm.
I know enough to
Hmm.
brush it off, right?
Yeah.
That's like a dragonfly that lands on your shoulder.
Hmm.
If you fondle it, nurture it, pay attention to it, it grows into a dragon pretty
Hmm.
quickly. You don't let that happen. You
Hmm.
brush it off. No, I don't think about cigarettes. Nope,
Hmm.
that's not what I do anymore. I am a non-smoker. And that's what happens with food. And you're right. It's very, very freeing. It's
Well, and I
shocking
just,
how
sorry
freeing.
to interrupt, but what you just said about the cigarette, what came to my mind is not for you. Like that's not for me. Like cigarettes aren't for me. And that's, I know that's one of the things that I read in your book, like the not for me food or the not for me drink. That helps me a lot with just some of these things like sugar. And that speaks to how this is different than diets too. It's not me restricting myself. It is a lifestyle change that's really aligned from this inner love of self. That is how I care for myself. So how do I care for myself? I care for myself by not, that sugar is not for me, or snacking is not for me, because if I snack, then I've alerted that part of my brain that now for the next 3 days is going to be like, oh, okay, but you did it yesterday. Let's, and it's like, no, 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 I don't want that in my head. I just want to be doing this like I'm brushing my teeth. So that is the part that I want listeners to hear, because I imagine some listeners are like, oh, that's too much, or it's too rigid, or too, and to that, I'd say that's that inner voice that you were speaking of earlier. That's, I did a podcast episode once and talking about the inner voices. We have our inner coach, inner critic, and an inner rebel. And that is the inner rebel that, like, you know what you want, but you've got this inner voice that's talking you out of it. Like, so that voice, just put it on the back burner for now and think, well, what if it wasn't too rigid? What if this is where the freedom is? What if this is my path forward? Because I mean, that is what your research has found. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
we've asked, and at the end of our boot camp, so we have a 10-week Bright Line Eating boot camp that introduces people to this way of eating, this way of life. And at the end of it, almost everybody says that their peace and serenity with food has gone up.
Mm,
So it sounds like a very rigid way of eating and living, but actually what happens is it's liberating. It's so freeing. People are not finding that they're obsessed with
hmm.
with food, with dessert anymore. They feel liberated. They really do. And
Yeah. Well,
circle back to what you just said about the
and
inner rebel,
yes.
because you mentioned the inner rebel earlier in a brilliant way. You were talking about how you harnessed your inner rebel when you quit alcohol to
Mm,
say, I don't want to be a pawn in big alcohol's
hmm.
advertising game, right? I don't want to be a positive line on their spreadsheet. Yay,
Right.
they hooked me. And you can do the same thing with food. So, yes, an inner rebel will say, well, that sounds really restrictive. I don't want to not eat sugar. I don't want to not eat flour. But you can take that same inner rebel and say, so what? You want to just be a pawn then in
Hmm.
big food's literal scheme to take over our brains and keep us hooked on their food, because they are taking us and putting us in fMRI machines and testing commercials and snack food formulations on our that part of the brain I was talking about, the addictive centers of the
Yes.
brain. They look and see how strong it lights up with this flavor or that flavor, this advertisement or that advertisement, and they know they have us hooked. They know it.
And
And
listeners, I just want them to hear, because that, like, follow the friggin' money. Like, do I, like, again, do I want to be, so they're getting me addicted for what? So that they're the companies that are selling this sort of stuff. But then also, what happens when I'm addicted and then I'm obese and I have all these, well, then I'm feeding into, I'm helping big pharma in a really big, so I just, not to get political here, but I just don't like being a pawn. So that is the inner rebel, and
it
that
is.
control of self and coming back to, what did our great grandmas eat? These weren't even an option. That's what's fascinating to me. Like when I think of my grandma, I think this generation, we are the ones. It's so convenient. It's so easy to get our dopamine hits in so many areas of our life. But my grandma, what did she have in a can? Like maybe tomatoes, but like there was no, I mean, it was
Yeah,
all right,
so
like
classic.
Whole Foods and whatever. And then now here we are. It's like we can just so quickly, we with an app, we can get it delivered. We don't even have to leave our house to get this
Yeah.
addiction centered to us. Can you tell me, because I know different people react differently, so I just want to, if the listener's listening and they're like, this isn't me, then we're going to take that food addiction quiz, but about how many people have a food addiction, since a lot of the food that we're eating is addictive. Like I'm just like, I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. 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 No, that's a great question. And the answer is very, very nuanced. I could talk for a long time about this. Okay. So, um, if you include everyone, it looks like about 24%. If you
mhm,
look at non-clinical samples, meaning people with no overweight, obesity, or eating disorder issues, it's about 14%.
Hmm.
Um, Now, here's the interesting thing. The current gold standard validated test for food addiction is the Yale Food Addiction Scale. And it's based on the DSM-5, and there's 11 criteria for substance use disorder. And to have a mild substance use disorder, you only have to have two of those criteria. And these
Mm,
are things like, I feel like I lose control once I have one, I have more. I've tried over and over again to cut back or try to quit and no lasting success. I'm dealing with health problems or other types of problems based on my use. Like a lot of people answer
hmm.
yes to a lot of these
Hmm.
questions around food, right? But to actually have an addiction, you have to have another factor has to be there, which is you have to have a clinically significant level of impairment or distress.
Mm.
You have to be distressed about it. You have to be like, it has to be bothering you.
Okay, you have to be annoyed by it. Like you're
Yeah, like well,
noticing.
clinical distress. Like
Yeah.
like this is my food and my food slash weight issue
Hmm.
is really bothering me. Or I'm experiencing a clinically significant level of impairment. Now, people might say, I'm not experiencing any impairment, but then you're like, well, how's work going? Well, I'm
Hmm.
not working. How come? Well, I'm on disability. Why? Because
Hmm.
I need two knee replacements because I'm 300 pounds and
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, well, isn't that impairment?
Hmm.
Oh. So what's interesting is that the average person in our society answers yes to 2.38
Mm. That's what
symptom
I'm
questions,
thinking. Yeah. Right.
2.38, but they don't say yes to the clinically significant impairment or distress. So, what that means, let me
Yeah.
just finish that
Yeah.
sentence, is realistically, let's say 15 to 25% of people have clinically significant food addiction.
Hmm.
Most people, but not everybody, I would say two-thirds to three-quarters of people have an addictive relationship with food.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's just a couple of these symptoms, but it's not so much that they have impairment or distress. And I would say about 25 to 33% of the population, a quarter to a third, do not have this issue at all.
Hmm. Wow.
These
Nice.
are the people who are like, I just want the one bite of dessert. Who wants
Yeah.
to share,
And
you
they're
know,
not thinking about food during their
they're
day.
not thinking about it
Right.
afterwards. They
Right.
get full really easily. Foods,
Hmm.
they have to remind themselves to eat sometimes, maybe set an alarm midday because they'll forget. And there are a lot of people like that.
Hmm.
And it's about a third of the population, roughly. On my quiz, when you take foodaddictionquiz.com, um, basically it's a number from 1 to 10 that you're going to
Hmm.
get. The ones and twos and threes are the ones who just don't have any at all. The fours, fives, and sixes, they've got enough addiction on board that if they also have genes for obesity, they're
Hmm.
going to find that the addiction that they have, the slightly addictive relationship with food, keeps them from being able to take their weight off.
Hmm.
And if you're 7, 8, 9, 10, now you've got an issue that is, probably only the nines and tens would
Hmm.
actually test for clinically significant food addiction, but sevens and eights are going to have a lot of trouble too.
Well, and I also just, depending on the age of the listener that's listening to this, I think it's important to look at how maybe the amount of time you're spending thinking about food. So we're thinking like, am I impaired and not working? Okay, no, I am working, but maybe impairment and the slippery slope is like, are you spending so much time thinking about your body size and eating and food and you're not looking at your marriage now that your kids have left the house or your fulfillment in things other than like, oh my god, I ate the right amount of calories yesterday, or my jeans from when I was whatever fit, or just that sort of, is food, is food becoming a distraction from the life that you're living, is something that comes up often in my show. And I really appreciate how you did finish the sentence there and saying that, like, yeah, some of us might have a clinical diagnosis of food addiction, but the addictive relationship to food. And also, speaking like of cigarettes, we brought up nicotine is addictive, and I'm pretty sure that if I started smoking, I would be suddenly in that addictive behavior loop with nicotine. So then, if I'm eating these addictive substances like sugar and flour, wouldn't I also be an addictive because of what I'm eating?
Well, that's the third of people that I talked about, they're not addictable.
They don't have, that's amazing.
No. No, they have a cigarette at a party and then they don't think about
And
one.
they're
They
never
have a
right.
cigarette at a concert and they literally won't think of one until
Yeah.
they have a cigarette at another concert. These are the people that drink coffee in the morning, and if they're at an Airbnb and suddenly there's only decaf, they're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Or
not
like
driving.
they'll have their like sugar is what I'm thinking, and then they won't have that, it won't be on their mind, or they'll, yeah, they're
No,
not thinking about it. So
they're not addictable.
that is
They
neat.
go
They're
home,
out there.
yeah, they go home after a back surgery with a Vicodin prescription.
Oh
They'll take
yeah.
it every 6 hours. And they don't become addicted. They're happy to get off it when it's time
Yeah.
to wean off it. They're not addictable.
Yeah. I just had a heart thing and they were trying to give me some form of um, oxycodone or whatever. And I was just like, no, I'll take Tylenol. Thank you very much. Because I don't trust myself and just trust the addictive part of my brain. So thank you. I, I guess I really, this is a good place to finish up, but I do want to ask if there's anything that you can offer to someone who's feeling discouraged or defeated, sort of in hearing this right now. That sort of that soft heart, I think, that is like,
Yeah.
oh,
Oh, totally. I mean, I am you. I've struggled with my food and my weight my whole life, really, because, after I lost my excess weight, I went into relapse after years after that for back and forth for a bit. And, there is hope. There is a solution. You might be thinking about weight loss drugs. Everybody is these days. I should probably speak to that for a second. The thing about weight loss drugs is that they're not going to solve our obesity pandemic. They're really not. And the reason is that 85% of people are going off them within 2 years.
mm, I
85%
didn't
of
know
people
that.
are going off them within 2 years. But let me explain why. Some of that is side effects. 16% go off because of side effects. Some of that is cost, but let me explain why exactly. And some is actually there are some people who just find that they don't want to live in a world where they don't get pleasure out of
Mm,
food and beverage.
mhm,
That's not a world they want to live in. But let me describe the weight loss results. So what happens is you get on Ozempic, right? A
mhm,
Wegovy, and let's say you're a woman, you're 200 pounds, and you think you should be 130 pounds. Like
mm,
that's what feels like your right size body is 130 pounds, but you're 200 pounds right now. So you have 70 pounds to lose.
mhm,
That's your frame of reference, right? What the research shows is these weight loss drugs, the weight loss is going to be slow in the first couple months because you're just building up the dose.
mhm,
And then you're going to lose weight pretty rapidly for about, the first year and 3 months. You're going to lose about 30 pounds on
mm,
average, 15% of your weight. 15% of 200 pounds is 30 pounds. So you're going to drop down over 1 year and 3 months from 200 pounds down, 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 down to 170. Now you might be paying two, three, four, $500 a month for this, right? Every month. And in the United States, it's gonna be $500 a month,
mhm,
500 a month, 500 a month, 500 a month. Now you're 15 months in, a year and 3 months in, and you go a whole month without losing any weight.
mhm,
500 bucks. You go another month without losing any weight. 500 bucks. You're 170 pounds. You think you need to lose down to 130.
mhm,
You go 4 more months without losing any weight. 500 bucks, 500 bucks, 500 bucks, 500 bucks. The next month you gain 2 pounds,
mm,
500 bucks. The next month you gain 2 more pounds, 500 bucks. Are you staying on that drug?
mm. I'm not, no.
Right? Now,
Right.
the research shows that what happens is you lose 15% of your body weight and then you regain a third of that. You
Mm,
regain a third of what you lost. So with our numbers, you go from 200 pounds down to 170, and now you're going to climb slowly back up to
got it.
177. And if you do
Mm,
stay on the drug 4 years out, you're going to be up at 177.
mm,
So what I want to say is these drugs are a tool if you want to work a program like Bright Line Eating.
mhm.
Your cravings and your obsession are so bad. Well, first of all,
You
bright
want to
line
get
eating
it
handles the cravings and the
right.
obsessions. Just do bright line eating first.
Mhm.
We have the same
Right.
weight loss
Yeah.
results as the drugs, except people don't regain weight.
No.
So, um, So try a natural solution first.
Mhm.
But some people do fall into a pattern of chronic relapse or their cravings never go away. Then the drugs can be a tool so that you can work a
You
program.
get over that mind chatter initially, or yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I often say I'm like, you know, pills without the skills is in terms of whatever we, because I'm a mental health coach. So I'm like, no, like if you need to take the pills initially to help you with the get over the bump or whatever, but if you're not learning the skills, then you just need more and more and more pills and it's not solving your problem. So what I'm hearing with this, it's like you just, and then the
Same thing.
medicine stops working. Yeah.
Same
Well, I'm
thing. So
so appreciative of what you've shared. I will put all the links to how to do the 10-week boot camp, how to do where to get the books, how to take that quiz in our show notes. Is there anything left that you think I've missed out or that you want to say?
no, it's been a great conversation.
Mm,
Thank you so much, Susie. Really
yeah.
wonderful talking with
I'm
you.
so grateful for the work you're doing in the world. You're helping so many people feel so much freedom and lightness in something and helping us live our lives our love, which is what the name of this podcast show is. So thank you very much for coming on.